Good evening. I'm going to call to order the Town of Los Gatos Joint Town Council Parking Authority Redevelopment Agency meeting for January the 17th, 2012. Madam Clerk, can we have the roll, please?
Yes. Councilmember Stephen Leonardis.
Here.
Councilmember Diane McNutt. Here. Councilmember Joe Przinsky.
Here.
Vice Mayor Barbara Spector.
Here.
Mayor and Chair Steve Rice.
Here. As is our custom, we have a youth leader in the to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm going to ask Eliza Aitchison to join me up here. She's a Student Community and Senior Services Commissioner for the town. She attends Kahila Jewish High School in Palo Alto, where she's a senior. She's president of Students Taking Action Now for Darfur. She's on the varsity volleyball team, and in addition to liking volleyball, she likes cooking, reading, and hanging out with her friends, and she has done service trips in Israel and in Southern California. So would you please stand and join Eliza in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's give Eliza a nice hand. Tonight we have some thank yous to hand out. The town of Los Gatos is very fortunate to have tremendous involvement from our citizens. We have a number of boards and commissions that people serve on in the town, and we have some terms that have ended this evening, or that have ended this year, and we'd like to give some commendations out. So I believe in the audience, if they could join me up here. Mary Curtis, Gary Schlow, Berkeley Miller, and Rob Fabella. Am I missing anybody else that came for this? Thank you. Gary? Thank you. So these four people, along with, I'll just read some names, Sean Carnow, Jonathan Knowles, Adrian McGrath, Tom Dodge, Matt Getler, Judy Glickman, Chuck Sloan, Susan Kettman, Marlon Rasmussen, and Jane Ogle all have served the town on commissions, and their terms have come to an end. Just to give you an idea, these commissions, Mary was on the Arts and Cultural Commission, Gary Schlow was on the Parks Commission, and both Berkeley Miller and Rob Fabella were on the Personnel Board. So I'm going to read one of the commendations, and then I'm going to hand them out, and you are going to give them a rousing thank you. Mary, we're going to do yours. Whereas Mary Curtis served the town of Los Gatos as a member of the town's Arts and Culture Commission from January 2008 to November 2011, and whereas during this period she unselfishly contributed her time, energies, and capabilities to the Arts and Culture Commission, and whereas the Town Council feels that such outstanding public service deserves special recognition, now therefore the Town Council of the Town of Los Gatos does hereby render with special appreciation a commendation to Mary Curtis for her dedicated public service to the Town of Los Gatos and its residents. Thank you all. Can I get one picture here? Thank you again. I'll let the town attorney tell us about our non-closed session.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. There was no closed session noticed, and there is nothing to report out.
You could have taken just a second longer. Okay, next on the agenda. Oh, first of all, if you plan to speak on any item tonight, please fill out one of those buff-colored cards that's in the front of the back of the bench in front of you, and you can turn those in over to the clerk to my left, your right. And when we get to either your agenda item or verbal communications, we will call on you. But that way we have those first. Council and manager matters. Any council matters? Seeing none, manager matters.
Yes. Honorable Mayor and Council, several brief items this evening. First, this coming Thursday, January 19th, 4 Los Gatos businesses and town staff will be profiled at the first regional Clean Tech Conference focused on new and emerging building technologies for local government, sponsored by the county, Joint Venture Silicon Valley, the Environmental Business Cluster, and the Clean Tech Open Alliance. The town's participation is based on a partnership between Los Gatos Parks and local business AquaQ, piloting an aggressive data-driven approach to water conservation and use. Second, the community workshop for the town's new sustainability plan will be held from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. on Monday, January 30th at the Adult Recreation Center here at the Civic Center. Los Gatos residents and businesses are invited to review and recommend Los Gatos solutions to reduce emissions, energy use, and waste. Third, it was announced late last week that the town will continue to receive 100% of the local sales tax resulting from Netflix DVD memberships until there's some future change to the operations of that business. This will result in a $1.5 million reduction to the previously announced $4 million budget gap projected for next year. I would like to take this opportunity to single out the efforts of our Finance Director, Steve Conway, and Tax Advisor, Bob Sendeos, who provided the information and analysis necessary to increase the proposed Los Gatos share of those revenues to 100%. Last, it is my honor to introduce to the council and community somebody you already know well, just not in his new role, Captain Matt Frisbee. Could you stand, Captain? Captain Frisbee started his new duties just last week, joining the strong command team of our police department led by Chief Scott Seaman. Matt has had an exceptional career with Los Gatos, rising from patrol officer to sergeant to leading investigations, including the successful prosecution of the Achille homicide. Please join me in congratulating and welcoming Captain Matt Frisbee. And tonight's Did You Know could not be more appropriate. How do you use our library while it's closed for moving? Library Director Linda Dido will be presenting. Linda?
Good evening, Council, Mayor. Your neighbor right next door, the Los Gatos Public Library, closed its doors January 15th, and we will reopen in glory and splendor on February 11th in our new location. During that period, you may still check the library catalog, make requests for books. We just can't look for them because at the moment we don't know where they are. They're in transit from the old building to the new. We are holding any request you made for us and are keeping it in the library, waiting for you on February 11th. You can still use all the electronic services. You can download ebooks, download music, all for free with your library card. Use the databases, search for magazines, and read them online. If you absolutely have to have a library, the Vineland branch of San Jose is located down the street, and the Saratoga Library is located in the other direction. But please be aware that there is a non-resident user fee to use the Saratoga Library now. So the only phone number in operation is the one at the present, where we will be glad to answer your questions, which have all day have been no, we're not open. And we look forward to seeing you on February 11th, and you can pick up a little flyer to remind yourself of the wonderful surprises in store a day full of music, refreshment, and celebration of this wonderful project that you have led us into. Thank you.
That concludes staff report.
Okay, thank you. New library, huh?
New captain, new library, we have it all.
Very cool. Okay, next on the agenda is the consent calendar. Would any council member like to pull an item off the consent calendar? I see none. Any member of the public wish to pull an item? I see none. So I will look for a motion for the consent calendar.
Move to approve consent.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Brzezinski, second by Vice Mayor Spector. Any discussion? Those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next up is verbal communications. This allows up to 3 minutes for any speaker who wishes to address the council on any item not on tonight's agenda. I don't currently have any cards. If anybody would like to speak on an item, you'll be able to fill out a card after you speak. You'll have 3 minutes. If you would please introduce yourself and go right ahead.
Yep. Dave Weissman, Francis Oaks Way. On May 24th, 2010, I called the Los Gatos police for multiple probable gunshots on the property adjacent to mine. Officer Howard responded and upon arrival took shelter behind his car. The property in question sits in a V-shaped canyon which amplifies, echoes, and reverberates gunshot sound. The tree cover also prevented the officer from directly seeing the shooters, who, according to Officer Howard, were skeet shooting. They were told to stop. Checking town codes indicates that since this property is greater than 5 acres, in fact it's 8 acres in size, the discharge of firearms is permitted. Imagine my surprise in reviewing the town code section on weapons to find that just below the firearms section is another section that prohibits anyone from wearing, carrying, or having in their possession any type of slingshot. So, it is okay to possess and shoot a high-powered rifle or machine gun within the town's limits, but not to carry a slingshot. This makes no sense to me in a residential neighborhood. There were a series of successive incidences over the next 18 months. But on December 29th, 2011, a repeat incident of over 150 shots fired during a 70-minute period prompted further efforts, including speaking with the town attorney regarding the safety of such events and violations of the noise code. Ms. Propp replied that the language in the town code regarding weapons has existed from at least 1968. Proposed changes in town code language are, according to Ms. Propp, generally brought forward by the town manager's office at the council's request. Hence, I come before you to request that the council instruct the town's manager's office to agendize this issue for a future town council meeting. Ms. Propp also said that regulation of the town's noise ordinance is the police department's responsibility. The noise map shows that Francis Oaks Way is under the following restriction: no noise louder than 59 decibels at the property line. For reference, normal conversation between two people standing 3 to 5 feet apart is from 60 to 70 decibels. These gunshots are easily heard inside my house with the windows closed, which is some 50 yards from the property line. They clearly exceed 60 decibels in volume. The police department doesn't know if they have a decibel meter, and even if they did, it would take recalibration and sending it back to the manufacturer. I'd like for these items to be agendized and for, I would think, the code to be changed.
Thank you, Mr. Wiseman. And again, if you'd please fill out a card and submit it to the clerk. Thank you. Any other verbal communications? Seeing none. We'll move on to our public hearings. Item number 5, hazardous vegetation abatement. Staff report by Parks and Public Works Director Todd Capurso.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Happy New Year to everyone as well. This hazardous vegetation program is one of two that the town participates in conjunction with Santa Clara County. And I would like to point out to you before we get much further on this that we do have a representative from Santa Clara County here as well by the name of Ray Moreno back in the corner to help me out if I get in trouble. And this program focuses on weeds. It's more of a preventive program which the town participates in the springtime as opposed to the brush program, which is more of a late summer high fire season program. So during this program, any property that has been in the program in prior years or has been identified for having an excessive amount of weeds, the property owner is noticed in November. They're notified of this public hearing. They have first option to abate the weeds themselves, and if the weeds are not abated by roughly April 15th, the action is taken by Santa Clara County and the problem is addressed. So I believe we have 114 parcels that have been identified. To this date, we have not received any letters of inquiry or any protests, so we're looking to see if there's any public participation tonight, and if there is not, we would recommend that you close the public hearing and order the abatement of the hazardous vegetation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Capurso. Any questions of staff? Seeing none, I'm going to open the public hearing. If you'd like to come up, please turn in your card. And then you may go ahead. You'll have up to 3 minutes.
Hello. I've lived in Los Gatos since 1990.
Could you give us your name, please?
My name's Dottie Schaefer. I live on Happy Acres. I've lived in Los Gatos since 1985, and every year since 1985 we have cut our...
I'm sorry. Ms. Schaefer, could you address your comments,
Yes.
please, to the council, and thank you.
I've lived here since 1985, and every year since 1985 we have faithfully cut our hill. 2 years ago, after the late rains, we were 4 days late cutting a very small spot, 10 by 10, of our 2/3 acre property. We immediately cut it 4 days later. We hesitated to wait to cut that 10 by 10 patch for one reason and one reason only. The weeds, the grass, had not sufficiently gone to seed, and we wanted to harvest the seeds to make sure that our hillside did not slip. It was a year of late rains and late maturity on the seed side. We then got a fine, and now we're on this weed abatement problem. I resent the fine. I resent being put on this program with the history that we have of our property. And had the weed abatement people simply gotten out of their vehicle, they would have seen that all of the rest of the 2/3 of the acre had been cleared. But evidently they did not. This is very upsetting to me, and it makes me wonder about how effective this program is, especially when I look across the street from me where 2.5 acres of brush has been wildly growing for the whole time that I've lived in my property. Additionally, the ditch next to my property, which is actually town property, is full of brush, never been cut. You can barely drive down the street because of the brush. It interferes with driving, and I wonder about the justice of this program. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schaefer. Any questions? Seeing none. Any other public comment? Nobody's rushing to the microphone. I'm going to close the public hearing. I'll look to council for discussion or a motion. Councilmember Leonardis.
Thank you, Mayor Rice. Just a quick comment addressing the speaker's concerns. I was just wondering if staff can follow up and do a site visit the property across the street and see what's going on with that to confirm her concerns, address her concerns.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Leonardis. That is something that we will certainly follow up on. We have the speaker's information. I believe we have a card on it, and I've got the address written down. I cannot speak to this parcel in particular, but just to give the council some additional background for how parcels end up on this list. As the speaker said, one once a property has been identified either through inspection or through some other means, whether it's the full parcel or even a portion thereof, it does remain on the program for up to a 3-year period. If there's 3 years of compliance, at that point the parcel would drop off. And there typically is a fee associated with that first year because there is an administration fee that's charged by Santa Clara County as well as whatever work is done. From that point forward, the option, as I said earlier, is the property owner has the first option to take care of the weed problem. So I cannot speak to exactly what transpired on this parcel. Would be happy to follow up on that. But again, the property owner has the first option at compliance before Santa Clara County steps in. But we will follow up not only on this property, but with the town reference property also as mentioned. Anything further on that, I can ask Mr. Moreno to respond to if there are additional questions.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing none. Any further discussion or a motion? Councilmember Przinski.
I'll move the recommended action.
I'll second that.
Motion by Councilmember Przinski, second by Councilmember Leonardis. Any discussion? Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next up is item number 6, Plan Development Application PD 10-001 and Negative Declaration ND 10-001, property location 135 Riviera Drive, property owner and applicant is Sobrato Interests 4. I've asked the town attorney to answer some basic questions before we get into the staff report. So, Madam Attorney, if you would give us your summary, please.
Thank you, Mayor and council members, members of the public. The planning and community development staff, who are the subject matter experts on the actual project application, are prepared to present a full staff report and answer any of the council's questions. But at the request of the mayor, let me start off by framing the legal requirements concerning this application. The application for the plan development includes a request under the state law density bonus provisions set forth in the government code. In an effort to encourage affordable housing projects in California, the state legislature passed the state law density bonus in late 1979 and significantly amended the legislation in 2004 with some minor amendments in 2005 and 2006. Basically, when an applicant requests a density bonus for a residential development, the local agency must grant the requested density bonus and the applicable incentives or concessions requested by the developer, so long as it meets the affordability covenants. In the application before you tonight, once the applicant agreed to provide 20% of the total units of this project, and again, we'll defer to staff, but in this case, it was 20% affordable units of the 118 base density units that are allowed at this location, then applicant is entitled by right to a density of 35%, or in this case, an additional 42 units. So basically, under state law density bonus, once the applicant provides a certain percentage of affordable units, they're entitled to a certain percentage of additional density. And staff believes that this applicant has met that standard. There's only limited grounds in state law to deny these types of projects. And unless one of the numbered exceptions can be articulated based on substantial evidence before the council tonight, approval of the density bonus allowed by state law is mandatory. The basis for the denial is set forth in more detail in your staff report, but briefly the grounds are as follows. The town has an adopted housing element in compliance with state law, and the town has met or exceeded its share of the regional housing needs for, in this case, low income level household category. The proposed project has a specific adverse impact on public health and safety that cannot be mitigated without resulting in the project being unaffordable. Denial of the project or adding conditions is required to comply with state or federal laws. The project is proposed on land zoned for agriculture or resource preservation, or the project is inconsistent with the town's zoning ordinance and general plan land use designation, and the town has an adopted housing element in accordance with state law. Separate and apart from the state law density bonus, what's at play with this application is also the town's general plan policies, including policy statements and action items that encourage development of affordable housing in the town of Los Gatos. Specifically, there's an action item in the general plan that provides that affordable units are not included when calculating density for a property. So, as applied in this case, if the base density is 118 and the developer is providing 20% affordable units out of that 18, which is 24 units, it's actually 23 and some fraction, but state law mandates that we round up, then under the town's general plan, the policy that has been applied by the Planning Commission and Council in past practice and past projects has been that the affordable units don't count towards the density. There are several projects in the town that have a greater density than its base density based on this plan as it's been applied in past applications by the town council. To be consistent with the general plan language and past practice, the 24 affordable units provided by applicant as proposed were not counted towards the total density of this development project. As staff will explain, the current zoning for this property allows 118 units. Under the state law density bonus, the applicant is entitled to the 42 units. And under the general plan policies, as interpreted by staff, the 24 units made available to low-income level households are not counted toward the project total density under the general plan goals, policies, and actions. Therefore, taking into consideration the state law, which mandates, which has mandatory requirements, the general plan policies, and existing zoning, the applicant would be allowed a total of 184 units on this property. The application by the Sobrato company at their discretion has applied for 173 units, which is below the maximum allowed under the multiple policies. Of the total number of units, 24 will be made available to low income level households and 1 will be made available to a moderate income level household. And I'm available for questions now or after the staff report.
Okay. Do we have any questions at this moment? Seeing none, we'll move on to the staff report. Ms. Davis.
I'd like to start with the recommendation in the staff report, which I believe led to a little bit of confusion, as we did receive some questions on that. It is standard practice for staff to recommend that the council uphold the Planning Commission's decision, so we started with that as our basis. So the initial recommendation is to uphold the Commission's decision to deny the project. Their staff felt in this particular case, the Planning Commission recommendation was to deny the project, and that was based on the belief that the project will have an adverse impact on the riparian corridor. Staff provided an alternative recommendation for Council's consideration to approve the project based on the project's compliance with state density bonus law and its consistency with the general plan. The property is located on a private street called Riviera Drive. It's accessed from 2 streets, either Millbrae or Rushmore Lanes, which come off Town Terrace. The project site is 5.9 acres. The existing complex has 123 units. 102 of those are 1-bedroom and 21 are 2-bedroom units. There are currently 164 designated parking spaces. 62 are in carports and the remaining 102 are uncovered. There's also pool and landscape and recreation areas on the site right now. The proposal from the applicant is to, for a planned development, to allow addition of 50 new units. 4 new buildings would be constructed. They're 35 feet high. 24 of the existing apartments would be converted to affordable units. Those would be low-income units. And then 1 moderate income unit would be designated within one of the new buildings. Also, some amenities would be constructed. The pool and spa would be relocated and constructed in a different spot. Fitness center, leasing center, resident lounge, and barbecue area are also proposed. Parking. State law requires 220 spaces for the project, and that's based on one space requirement for one-bedroom units and 2 spaces for 2-bedroom units. So the mix would be, with the proposal, 126 one-bedroom units and then 47 2-bedroom units. So that's why we arrived at the 220. Town code requires 260 spaces based on a 1.5 space per unit standard. The applicant's proposing to have 261 spaces on the site. There is also a provision in the town code for guest parking. It does have a caveat that the planning commission or council in this case can determine that either more or less guest parking is required. In this case, the applicant's applying state density bonus, so we did apply that state law parking requirement to the project, which is the 220 spaces. The northernmost parking area would extend with this proposal. The parking right now goes pretty much, there's a chain link fence on the eastern side of the property, and beyond that chain link fence is the creek area. And the proposal is to extend that parking area a little bit northward into the area that's currently got lawn and some trees in it. And there's a volleyball court and a few other things in there. The applicant did evaluate whether that could be reduced, and it could potentially come back be cut back a little bit, but the fire turnaround is a required element that's there, and the most that could probably be done is to eliminate about 8 parking spaces in that area. One thing that the applicant has proposed to try and offset the addition of that paved area is they're going to add permeable pavers in the drive aisles and uncovered parking areas. So that'll be a lot better for the drainage system in the area. The applicant has worked with H.T. Harvey Ecological Consultants to develop a riparian restoration plan. That plan includes removal of invasive species, native riparian planting, restoration of the riparian canopy. Currently, there aren't any real trees within this segment of the creek, and that would be a great benefit. There's also a complete new drainage system and a new lighting program that will be installed with the project. Both of those would be beneficial to the creek corridor. Santa Clara Valley Water District did recommend a larger buffer between the existing improvements and the creek. The district did not specify a distance or amount. They simply said that they thought there should be a better buffer. That's one of the reasons the applicant went to such an extent with the ecological consultant to really evaluate the proposal, and I think that they can answer the questions in more detail if there are any of the things. The biologist is available tonight, can address the riparian canopy and how the project will benefit the creek area. I'm not going to repeat the state density bonus law, but I do have a slide that shows how it was calculated. If the council likes, I can put it up on the screen. The bottom line is that the applicant's proposing 173 units, and of those, 25 would be affordable, 24 low income, 1 moderate. They would be increasing the current parking ratio on the site, adding amenities for residents, doing landscape upgrades throughout the complex, and doing the restoration of the riparian corridor as part of the proposal. In order to approve the project, council needs to make a finding that the proposed amendment or the plan development rezoning is consistent with the general plan. We do need an action on the mitigation monitoring plan and mitigated negative declaration. And if the decision is to approve the project, the PD ordinance would need to be introduced. That concludes staff's presentation. If you have any questions.
Thank you. Any questions of staff? Councilmember Prasinski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're not looking at architecture and site tonight, is that correct?
No, that would be a subsequent application.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none, I'm going to call forward the applicant. And you will have 10 minutes for your presentation.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Tim Steele, and I'm the Senior Director of Real Estate Planning for the Sobrato organization. First, let me thank you for the opportunity to come here tonight to speak about this project, the application to add 50 units to 123 existing units that were built in 1960. In addition to that, we're providing 25, has been suggested by staff, affordable units within that mix. Second, I'd like to suggest that we appreciate the opportunity to work with town staff. They are passionate about what's good for the town, are comprehensive in their analysis, and conduct themselves in a very professional manner, and it's a privilege to work with them and a joy, so I appreciate that. Third is I'd like to introduce my team tonight, and they're here available to answer any questions for you in any manner relative to the project. First, I'd like to introduce Jim Guthrie, who's our architect. He's right here. Paul Attiri, who's our guru of landscape architecture, sitting next to him on the right. Mark Knudsen is our civil engineer with Kieran Wright. Pat Bossier, who has been referred to earlier with H.T. Harvey, is our biological and environmental consultant, and he actually has a lot of slides tonight that can answer your questions if we want to get to that level of detail. He's available. And then last but not least, Annie Mudge, who works for Cox Castle Nicholson, and she's our project counsel. They're available to answer anything. In my short presentation, I'd like to start with talking briefly about history. This project has been referenced, built in 1960. It's 123 existing units, which is an existing 20.5 units per acre. In 2000, Subrato bought this property, and through our naivety, we saw ideas of how to invest in this property, and the first thing we did was come up with a plan to add an additional 109 units for a total of 39 units per acre, again significantly above the town's maximum of 20, and we were proven that we were quite naive about what the desires and interests of the town were. We went away sulking, and that was in 2000. We ran off and decided we'd not look at this too closely and work on Netflix campus in the Aventino, all the while talking to staff about what we could do and might do about Riviera Terrace in a long-term plan. In 2000, we thought we had struck that kind of mix and with staff and came forward with the CDAC, an application similar to what you might see tonight, but actually for 56 units, not 50 that we're playing for tonight. We went away feeling warm and somewhat encouraged to pursue that application. And in modifying and preparing the final application for that, and in discussions with staff, we reduced the density further to 50, which is what you see tonight. In 2011, September, as you know, we went to the Planning Commission, and then here we are tonight. I'd like to also list next is some of the benefits which we feel are somewhat obvious and we're proud of being able to provide for the town. First, this proposal allows for new investment into existing aging housing stock, adding new units to existing housing stock within the densities of its neighboring properties, improving the existing condition of an adjacent creek habitat, also allowing us to improve the interface between the existing and proposed project with that creek habitat. This allows us to replace all of the hardscape and landscape around the existing two buildings on the backs of the 50 new units. It allows us also to improve the existing storm drain, and as an example of that improvement, from the lower entry into the project down to the creek, all of that parking lot sheet flows with no filtration or delay directly into the creek, unfettered. Our new project would improve that, would filter it, would bioswale it before it gets discharged into the creek. It allows for the addition of amenities to the existing rental community, improves the overall existing parking ratios. It provides for trash enclosures, which are non-existent currently in its project. It provides for an improved fire department emergency access, not just to the new proposed, but significantly improves the access to the existing buildings, as well as it provides for more water, emergency water distribution for fire response. The next thing we've talked a lot about, you've heard a lot about, is the affordable housing. And the state density bonus does allow up to 20% to be provided in low income, and that in turn would provide for a 35% density. But as you've heard from Judith and Suzanne, that we actually are providing more than that 20% requirement, and we're not using it all. In essence, that equates to we're providing 4 additional affordable units above and beyond what state density bonus requires us to do. And in addition to those 4 low-income units, we're also providing 1 additional moderate income, which is not a requirement of the state density bonus. But all of that came out of working with the planning staff and town staff over the years to identify what were the important items to the community and tried to incorporate as many of those as possible. An additional item that's not really expounded in your staff reports, but it was a base idea, was we are willing to open, when you did have prior, and hopefully will have in the future, housing funds, and making those 24 available for further buy down and affordability to a very low or extremely low in cooperation with the town. In closing, I'd like to request that the Mayor and Town Council considering approving our application using the alternative bullet points that are in the recommendation section of staff, mainly waiving the reading of the proposed ordinance, adopting the mitigated negative deck, and adopting findings supporting the zone change and associated ordinances. Thank you for your time, your consideration, and support, and I remind you that my team is here at your full disposal to ask any questions you might need. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Before I go to the public hearing, I guess we should do disclosures. Just go from end to end. Councilmember Przinski.
Yes, I was able to meet with Mr. Steele earlier to discuss the project, and I have visited the site 4 times, last of which was actually this afternoon, and I met with one of the residents who was on the site at the time to discuss this proposal.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you. I've met with Mr. Steele late last year. I visited the site when the balloons were up, which I guess would have been around September of 2011, and again today.
And I met with Mr. Steele and have visited the site on several occasions.
I met with Mr. Steele in December, visited the site when the balloons were up, and again sometime in early January.
And I met with Mr. Steele earlier today, and I have also visited the site on numerous occasions.
Okay, then we got that. Move on to public testimony. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we can do that. We should do that. Questions for the applicant. I'm sorry. Why don't you go? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Councilmember McNutt.
Mr. Steele?
Hi.
These are in no particular order, just my notes as I made them as I was doing my prep for tonight. When you and I met, one of the issues that we talked about was transition for the current residents, and I believe it also came up in the Planning Commission. Can you talk about what plans you have to make sure the current residents are not incredibly inconvenienced during construction? They have an opportunity to apply for the affordable housing units and an opportunity to move into the new units or relocate in the old units if they want to improve their view.
Well,
if there is a plan for that.
I will not deny that there aren't any impacts on residents during construction, so we're trying to be very cognizant of that. Second is I've committed to the town and to staff that we would propose a marketing plan of how to deal with all of those points at the submittal of a building permit, and hopefully would have that as a condition of approval for the approval of the building permit. I have already given a lot of thought and would offer some of the things that would be in that proposed marketing plan. First is the existing resident project is under rent control, and so we would be 100% honoring all of the ordinance requirements under the rent control and not be displaced because of this project. Second of all, upon pulling of the building permit, I would be proposing that we would then extend the opportunity to all of the existing residents before it's made available to the general public, that any of them who wish to apply for any of the affordable units, be it the low or the moderate, are perfectly willing and get preference as far as timing. I can't make any preference to their eligibility. That's a town thing that would have to be complied with by the town review, but we would be offering it to them first. And once all of them have had an opportunity, then we would start marketing the available units as they come open, both to those required affordable units first, and then to the market rate after that.
Okay. And may I do one more? I know we're not doing A&S tonight, but I had a couple of questions or concerns regarding the siding and the architectural style as being proposed. So it's two parts to this. Given the wish list of the Water District to have an increased buffer between the creek, is there any way to revise your proposed siding of the buildings on the site in order to increase that buffer, or the parking area, and just to adjust that to get some additional space there? And then again, as we talked about in December, I'm very concerned about what appears to be, from the preliminary drawings, really stark differences in architectural style between the new buildings and the old buildings, and my worry that you're trying to create a cohesive community, and as you move through the process, should the project be approved, I just think we need to be really vigilant to make sure that that all works, because right now it just looks like an old, tired building and a new kind of formula type of building kind of mashed together on the site.
Can I take them out of order?
Sure.
I'll do the latter first. I think one of the challenges to begin with in looking at a very, very simple architectural building built in 1960 is that's been enhanced in its simplicity by only having one color, a little bit of blue, but primarily all white on a very flat surface. So you start off with a very strong challenge in that the buildings don't even read very well as they currently exist, and probably have more potential for architectural expression by adding color. The mosaics that are on site have some very period colors that we intend to propose expounding on and celebrating more throughout the project, including all the signage having a mosaic theme to them and how they read. But it is a very flat building. It is a flat roofed building, and what our initial challenge was, in addition to the site sloping towards the creek and trying to respect that more than the existing buildings, but also find a model that wouldn't necessarily heavily compete and make it look the existing buildings look worse, if not better. So our plan is, and we've already been working with the town architect, Cannon, is to continue working with them to try to look at ways that color and materials can tie the two, the old and the new, better together. But the flatter roof, contemporary, fairly simple, is meant to be a complement and not a competition. So we think we put effort in. We expect to put more effort in as we come back through the architectural review. On parking and can we change the models of the buildings? We've been staring at this for a long time and looking at all of the elements of the site and the challenges of the site. And we feel that the type of model and unit that we're working with here is the best model to work with for the site constraints. Can we buffer off of the creek? I think the area that we could look a little bit closer at is, as Suzanne made reference to, is down in the expanded parking area, where we might be able to pull 4 back and still maintain the fire hammerhead, the turnaround portion that the fire department can get their truck in and out. We tried to look at offsetting some of that impact, if you will, of that paved area by adding other areas of pervious that aren't there today as pervious. It's a balance between how many parking stalls we would be providing versus how many units. I can't afford to reduce the amount of units, not proposing to reduce them, but I might be able to reduce a few of the parking stalls in that area.
That's all for now for me.
Okay, other questions? Councilmember Brzezinski?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Steele, I think my question, one of my questions is aligned with Councilwoman McNutt's, in that this, the currently existing building seems to, in all of your presentations and all of your graphics, is presented as basically a blank space, a blank single color box. And my issue is, as we go into architecture and site, are there any proposals going to come forward from your organization that attempt to present more congruent architectural accoutrements, if you will, to that building? Is there anything that it could be in the plan, as you speak to your architectural team, that could actually transform this, what I consider relatively plain and uninteresting architecture, into something that might be more interesting and more creative? I put that out there as a question because I've not seen anything addressed from your side on that to this point.
Well, first, you're talking about the existing buildings,
Correct.
right? Okay, because Jim's pretty protective of his new buildings.
I'm not talking about the new buildings. I'm talking about the current
The application today is to put 50 units in. We anticipated all along that we'd be coming back through the architectural review and working closer with Mr. Cannon, the town's architect, and our architect, to look at some of the additional color palettes and things that we can do to the existing buildings on the outside to tie everything together that much more. But that wasn't necessarily the application in question tonight. So
certainly, and I'm not
we didn't want to
interested-
confuse the issue by doing things that were ahead of where we are tonight.
No, I just want to make sure that you're aware that I would be very interested in seeing an enhancement of the architecture of the currently existing building as you move into the architecture component of this discussion.
I can tell you that Jim is looking for that
all right.
direction to run as soon as I give him the okay.
I'd like to talk about the creek, the riparian. I don't know if Mr. Boucher is the one who should answer or address this for me.
You can come up and let's hear the question. Maybe we can team it. Or
All right. The question basically is this. It relates to the decision of the Planning Commission. And there was a comment made by Commissioner Bourgeois as the motion was being made to deny the acceptance of the mitigated negative deck. The comment was, we don't have a plan in front of us, and we have required that of all other applicants that have had riparian impacts. We've always had a mitigation plan to go along with that. We don't have that right now, and so forth and so on. We have documentation that you submitted to us.
Yes, sir.
It seems to me in somewhat greater detail than was presented to the Planning Commission in its last meeting. Is that not correct?
That's correct.
Yes. Would you highlight for me those parts of this plan that you feel are most significant for the restoration of the creek? And I will say a caveat for me is it's in bad shape. I think it's in extremely bad shape. I visited that creek on both sides, on the trail as well as on the property, and of that entire stretch of Los Gatos Creek, it's probably the most poorly maintained, if you will, section of the creek. So what is it in your plan now that you didn't present to the Planning Commission that you would like to highlight for me at this point?
Yes, sir. The original proposal that was put forth in the Mike Wood report and in the city's environmental document was to control invasives, and there was no real specificity as to the size and so forth. By the way, I have to agree with you wholeheartedly. The riparian corridors are just in terrible shape. You shouldn't be able to stand on one side of the creek and see the trail and people and pedestrians on the other side, but sort of the situation that we're in. That reach of the creek, I spoke with the water district a couple of times, and they sent a follow-up letter. They are controlling the giant reed. That's an invasive plant that's really only habitat for things like Norwegian roof rats and then the like. They are controlling that, and I think they're in their second year of spraying in there. There's you have to hit this plant a couple of times and then pull the roots out so they don't come back. What's critical now, that is on the Sobrados property. Their property line continues to extend. You've all been to the property, and it goes from that chain link fence. It continues past the middle of the creek, almost over to the bike path. And so that's the piece we're talking about restoring. And so once you get rid of the giant reed clumps, you need to come back so the reed doesn't come in. You need to come back with very intensive planting of shrubs and trees. And what we have, in addition to the reed, which is very obvious, there's ivy that has been climbing the sycamores for years. And if you jump the fence like I did, the interesting part for biologists is getting down next to the creek there, is that the ivy has, and we have certified arborists on staff, so I verified this with them. They did some research. The ivy actually leads to the eventual death of the sycamores. And you go jump the fence and you can see several large sycamores completely tipped over into the creek. Probably the ones next to the parking lot are covered with ivy and are at risk as well. There's a whole host of other invasive plants in there that should be removed. There's palm trees in there. There's eucalyptus. There's invasive blackberry. There's a plant called vinca, which is a low-growing plant that just covers and smothers everything out. So it's in terrible shape. So the plan, to answer your question specifically, the plan would be to follow up once the Water District, and I think they're going to hit it again, the giant reed this spring. And once and the gentleman's name is Rick Austin of the Water District. I've spoken with him, as I said, a couple of times. Once that is done, we would go in and remove all the other invasives in there, including the basketball hoops and everything else. And then come back with an aggressive planting program of native shrubs and trees in appropriate ground cover. And hopefully, and these wouldn't be small trees, they would be fairly large trees grown up and collected from from seed and stock collected within the watershed as directed by the Water District. That's the primary benefit. And other things on site are the improvement of the drainage, goes straight in right now untreated. And also there's direct lighting in the riparian corridor. We're going to do screening, planting along the back fence, and tree pockets around the sycamores that are at risk in the parking lot. There's asphalt right up to the base. So those are the primary. That is really what is different. There's additional tree pockets, additional trees, and the screening, and then the detail. We were trying to balance the detail that we put into the mitigation plan. Originally, there really wasn't any detail. There was just some vague ideas about removing invasives and so forth. But as we move forward, our firm routinely does plans and specifications, landscape, irrigation layouts, and all of that. So it gets quite specific after this point, and there's plenty of room to move it around. I know the Water District doesn't. There's the sudden oak death is spread to a large degree by bay trees, and we've agreed to take that out because we don't want to cause that problem in the corridor. So hopefully I've answered your question.
Yes, you have. And I guess my follow-up is this going to require, given the fact we're going back to native species, we're eliminating all the invasives, what is the commitment to maintaining the riparian once we have done the restoration by our team, by our developer?
Right. In order to do the work, the riparian restoration work would start at the chain link fence and the bollard fence and go and stop short of the water line. And that is the jurisdiction of the California Department of Fish and Game. So to go in there and do that work and remove those invasive species and plant, you would need a streambed alteration agreement. In situations like this, it is not hard to get that from them. But they would require, number one, a formal riparian mitigation monitoring plan put together, and they routinely require that there's 10 years of monitoring. Now, the monitoring is done every year, and it measures tree canopy, height, percent cover, mortality, and all these quantitative measurements are taken every single year, and there's remedial measures. If a tree dies in year 2, you replant it, and you're required to monitor that a little bit longer. There are final success criteria, and they would typically say, we expect that that we would consider the riparian plantings to be successful once the canopy reaches 70%, relative cover. And that has to be met and measured before the Fish and Game. And they, we would submit the annual reports, or whomever does the actual work would submit those reports for review and approval by Town Council, Planning Commission, and also the California Department of Fish and Game. Water District holds, I believe, an easement, maintenance easement on the property as well, and we would coordinate with them. What we don't want to do is put plantings in the channel that would increase or cause flow restrictions in that reach of the creek. Now, typically, there's a lot of large trees pretty much close to the live stream of the channel, and I don't think it would be a large impediment because it's a controlled release to a large degree, but that would be another agency we'd need to talk to about planting there.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you. Don't leave. I have a question for you, too. I'm also going to pull us back to the Planning Commission meeting and probably specifically to some of the comments made by John Bourgeois. And it seemed as though one of the issues raised by him and the Planning Commission was, at that point, which was September, a lack of a restoration plan. Mm-hmm. And as I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, you submitted to the town right after that meeting a letter or a report dated by you September 28th, 2011. I understand that document, that report, to be your restoration plan. Am I correct?
That's correct.
All right. And so then would this report then become the restoration plan that you were discussing with Mr. Przynski?
Yes, ma'am. But there would be an interim step that would flesh out additional details. There's a fair amount of cost involved when you take it to the next step, and that is we would have a detailed topographic survey done. We would core soils out there, send that soil samples out for analysis, collect seed. So a lot of those sorts of things that's sort of the next logical step that you would take the plan, and that plan would be submitted to the California Department of Fish and Game. For this report, we gave all of the detail in there, all of the success criteria, all the species, the percent cover, and the general overlay that would be put in. But the next report would be very detailed. The plots would show things at a 1 to 20 scale about specific plants, what size, where the irrigation lines are, and all of that.
So let me see if are you saying that there will be steps to take subsequent to what you have outlined in your September 28th report?
Well, if we were to go forward and actually prepare a permit application to the California Department of Fish and Game, they would want some additional detail. And to actually implement the work, I guess I'm saying a lot more detail would need to be generated on site. So.
Now, and you've already touched upon this, again, going back to your September 28th document, the landowner would be interfacing with various government entities.
That's correct.
And I am assuming that before the items in your report could be affected, their permission would have to be obtained.
Absolutely. In fact, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Okay, so let me step back. I'm trying to put this in context of what does the town do should this application go forward. Mm-hmm. And so if we said, all right, you need the restoration plan as identified in your report of September 28th, would we need to say more than that, or would that, in your opinion, cover it?
That covers all of the detail that needs to be provided to let you see what's being proposed for planning. The next step would be, as I say, to have grading plans, topographic maps generated for the actual work. It's above and beyond at this point. It's a lot like the question about the architectural detail. We can provide so much, information right now to give an overview. It's a conceptual plan, and quite often it's of an adequate level for permit agencies to review. But in order to implement the work, you'd have to do a bit more detail.
All right, thank you.
If I might add to that, normally when it's a condition of pulling a building permit, that the permits to do the work that's required by the town be in place. So I don't get a building permit until I show you that I have the permits that Pat's talking about with Fish and Game as a condition of being able to pull a building permit.
Thank you.
Further questions from council? Councilmember Leonardis.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. Question for Mr. Steele. Other than the exterior improvements to the existing complex, the two buildings, such as the landscaping and the barbecue and the rec room and those things, are you planning on doing any interior remodeling of the units?
Of the existing units?
Of the existing units, yes.
It's not in our proposal today to be doing that, but we would be doing internal, the plan is to do internal updating of the units as the units become available, which is what you normally do on an apartment project anyway. But if this project is approved as proposed, the idea is that there is an invigoration around the project, and part of that internally for us would be looking at replacing cabinets, carpets, countertops, appliances and such to make the whole project lift, if you will. It's just those replacement of appliances and such typically don't require permits other than from the building department if you're getting into new electrical or plumbing.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, I think you can sit down and we'll go to our public. First card I have is from Tom Dion.
Good evening. My name is Tom Dion. I live on Ohlone Court, directly south of this project. I'm just on the other side of the creek. I'm very excited about this project with one major problem, which is it's just too damn big. When you look at the way that they're approaching the density equation, if you will, you spent almost 10 minutes this evening trying to explain all these numbers about how big it should be and how big it can be and can't be. And I went to the documents that you provided, or the city, the planning commission, wherever they came from, the city site. And it says right here, I don't know if you can read it.
You can take the mic actually out of the holder if you want to.
Sorry. This applicant, Sobrato organization, has submitted a request to process the application under the state's density bonus law rather than the town's density bonus program. Now, I noticed that you start with the state's density bonus law, and you come up with a number, 161 units at density, and then you add the town's density magic number, if you will, and you come up with 173. 161 units sounds more reasonable. 173 just starts to get too big for this project, too big for the site, too big for the land. I'm there every day. I walk next to it. I go over there all the time. Also, if you look at more information on this farther into the memorandum, it even shows doing the bonus, the density bonus example using the state density bonus law, and then it also shows using the city bonus program. But nowhere in there does it say, hey, let's combine them. So I really think what you need to do, and actually, well, let me back up. The other problem, having sat through the Planning Commission meetings, they sat there and they spent a lot of time trying to figure out what is the proper density for this based on these density program laws. And there was a lot of back and forth, a lot of confusion. And there was a lot of, well, I believe we may be able to, or this or that, but not a lot of, this is the way it is. Having sat through this, what I really think needs to happen is the council needs to establish specific policy on this, as to say, we will, if somebody applies under the state density bonus law, that they are applying under that and not the state density bonus law and the city bonus law, or program, excuse me. And they need to, as I understand, the council needs to set up a policy so that the planning commission can then make decisions, and by the time it gets to you, this stuff is all already worked out. So I strongly urge you to disapprove of this in its current form and establish a program policy.
I'm going to have to stop you there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Question for you, Vice Mayor.
Mr. Dion?
Yes.
I want you, I know that there were numbers been flying off of our hundreds of pages and at the Planning Commission, but I want you to make some assumptions for what I'm going to ask you. I want you to assume if only the state density bonus were used, there would be 160 units. And I want you to assume that if we combine the state and add on to the town, it's 184. But I also want you to assume that the application is for 173. In your mind, why is it, and I'll use jargon, why is it significant? Why is it a big deal whether it's 160 or 173?
Well, interestingly, if I remember correctly, one of the buildings is actually 12 units, which is just the exact number that they're beyond the density program law. You take that extra building out, suddenly you get rid of all of those parking spaces that are needed for that. You get rid of the footprint needed for that building. All of these questions about how do we squeeze all the parking spots in there? How are we going to make it so that the fire department can turn around? How are we going to fit all of these things in there that need to fit? There was a lot of discussion about how to fit everything onto this site that's not quite big enough for what they want to do. All of those problems, issues, go away when you reduce the size to 160 or 161 units.
Thank you.
Okay. Further questions? Seeing none. James Purcell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is James Purcell. I live at 111 Via Teresa here in Los Gatos. I've been a Los Gatos resident for about 6.5 years, and I've worked in Santa Clara Valley for about 35 years, including 2 stints as the CEO of 2 large nonprofits, Catholic Charities, which has many clients who still need affordable housing, and Hope Services, which also has clients who need affordable housing. I come before you in support of this project, and particularly because it is going to offer a significant amount of affordable housing in our town. And I think it's commendable that the developer is willing and able to do this under the program that the state established, knowing the importance and the challenge of offering affordable housing. Certainly your previous discussions about affordable housing around other projects in the town lend themselves to understanding how important this issue is. I also have firsthand experience with this developer. My employer is Santa Clara University, and the Sobrato Company has developed 2 rather large and very handsome apartment complexes adjacent to the university. In fact, they were both done in conjunction with the university. This company is known for paying attention to architectural excellence. So I'm confident that they would be able to work with your staff to develop a proposal and a project that would benefit not only the low-income people but also the entire town. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Purcell? Seeing none. Elizabeth, is it O'Kane?
Hi, my name is Elizabeth O'Kane. I'm a resident of 135 Riviera Drive. I walk around that neighborhood every day, and I see in that immediate neighborhood no need for that level of new units. On Town Terrace, there's nothing but apartments. I see a lot of for rent signs, and every single apartment on Town Terrace is a significantly lower rent than is already at Riviera Terrace. Sobrato organization exists to make money, and they're very, very good at it. They're by no means hurting for money. The money that it would cost them to do this would bring into them huge amounts of money. They're already making a lot of money on this property, and it's just, organizations are made up of people, and there are people in this organization that I would like to see do the right thing and not try and squeeze every possible dollar out of the land that they are privileged to own in Los Gatos. I would like to see them leave some space that was left there by the architects in 1960 for good reason, particularly down near the creek side. Legal obligations aside, I would like to see Sobrato, the people at Sobrato, do the right thing, withdraw this, and come up with a much more reasonable and less huge and ambitious and, greedy plan. Thank you very much.
Okay, any questions? Seeing none, Lee Quintana.
Please excuse my terrible typing. I'm going to start off by saying I'm Lee Quintana, 5 Palm Avenue. I support affordable housing. I support the fact that the town has to be consistent with the state law. I also support the fact that the town obeys the law. There's so much that's been said that it's really hard for me to, in 3 minutes, cover it all. But I'm going to start by saying I do not believe that the town's calculations, and I said this many times, and I've supported it with statements, meets the intent of the state bonus law. Number one, the law was amended in 2008. And in the amendment, they added just 5 little words to one section. If permitted by local ordinance. Prior to that, that was not there. We do not have a local state, we do not have an ordinance that's in conformance with the state density bonus law. Therefore, the town is required to follow the existing state law. They have to default to it. The existing state law allows a maximum of 35% bonus. This project qualifies for that. That would be 160 maximum units. If you subtract out the 123 that's already there, you have a 37. That's a difference of whatever it is. I think it's 17. So that's number one. Number two, this is not in order. The state law does not exempt the town from secret requirements, and there's plenty of evidence in the record at this point that there could be a fair argument made that the project will have a significant or a potentially significant impact as it's currently proposed. The reasoning of adding the 24 units to the 24 units doesn't make sense to me. You're giving a double bonus for the same 24 units. The state allows 35%. The town's is 20%, and that is less than that allowed by the state, so the state trumps.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Quintana. Any questions? Seeing none.
Here.
Thank you. Darcy Palmer.
Hello, my name is Darcy Palmer. I am fourth generation resident of Los Gatos, and I currently live at 16345 Los Gatos Boulevard. As a child, I lived at Riviera Terrace. I guess first off, I just wanted to make a couple points. I appreciate Councilmember McNutt's concern for displacement and all the members' concerns for the impacts on the creek and pushing for a larger buffer. And also tree preservation. My understanding is that nearly all the trees are being preserved, and I appreciate that. As a child, I ate the guavas. I don't know if the guava trees are still there, actually, but so I'm kind of a Johnny-come-lately when it comes to this particular proposal. So I wanted to just emphasize my overall support for increased densities and for affordable units. As a child of a single parent, I appreciate the council and the planning commissions and the staff's support for a net increase and, of course, preservation for quality lower income units, whether they're rent controlled or whether they're low income, BMR income restricted. So I hope that that there's a holistic approach and a consideration of the impacts down the line on increase in rents and potential increases even on the rent restricted units. That's a concern. But overall, I support the designation of the affordable units and would appreciate more potentially of the new development units. And that's all. Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Palmer? Thank you. Andy Wu.
Good evening. My name is Andy Wu. I live on College Hill, and I've been before this council before. Let me just say, when the town's attorney, Judith Propp, gave a recitation of how density bonuses were calculated with stacking of bonuses upon bonuses, for a very brief second, I thought she was talking about Wall Street executive compensation. But just for a brief moment, because it made absolutely no sense to me. But let me take what I believe Ms. Propp said about the town's general plan bonus add-on. I believe she said that that town bonus add-on was a matter of custom and practice. And I'm certainly not one who normally goes against custom and practice. However, every project is different. Had Sobrato come to this town in 2000 with this plan, I wouldn't have as much of an objection to the number of units that they're proposing now. Right now, there are other mega projects coming before this council. You will have cumulative impacts. There is no reason why the town should allow stacking if it doesn't have to. Just as a caveat, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. I think the two wars in the Middle East have all taught us that in the last decade.
Any questions for Mr. Wu? Next up is Dan Wu.
Hi, my name is Dan Wu, and I'm with Charities Housing. We're a nonprofit affordable housing developer based in the county. We're also proud owners of 2 properties here in the town of Los Gatos. We own and operate 13 affordable units right here in the town. And I'm here to urge you to support this particular project because of the 25 affordable units that could potentially come online here. In the current environment, in the last couple of years, the California Supreme Court under the Palmer case, took away the inclusionary zoning, which disallowed any apartments to provide affordable units. And then just last month, the Supreme Court took away the Redevelopment Agency, which provides significant resources in providing affordable housing. And this particular proposal is not seeking any financial support from the town, and we hope the council will consider working with the developer to potentially even bring the affordability down to even lower level where a family and potentially earning less than $50,000 could live in the town and enjoy all the amenities that's around here. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, last card I have is from Jack Van Atta. If anybody else wishes to speak, would you please fill out a card and hand it in to the clerk, my left, your right. Mr. Van Atta.
Thank you. Feel like I'm down here once a week now. The thing I would like to say, I have a lot of respect for the Sobrato Corporation. They do a lot of great buildings. They do a lot for the community. But I'm going to be back here again, I'm sure in the future, just continually pounding on the fact that we have a lot of traffic coming our way. I believe this project, as currently designed, is about 333 cars. I don't remember what the student count is, but I would go along with what Tom said. If we could cut out one building, we can cut out a number of these cars and probably a few more students. But every one of the projects we have going on are big projects. The cumulative effect is a big deal. So I'll be here maybe on a weekly basis just saying the same thing. But thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Van Atta. No questions? I have no further cards from the public. Nobody's rushing to the podium. Okay. I'm going to bring back the applicant, Mr. Steele. You have 5 minutes to rebut, wrap up.
I promise not to use all 5. Again, I want to say I appreciate so far the amount of work that we've been able to work with the staff, with the council and the Planning Commission, and all of its consultants and advisors to put a project in front of you that was not concocted or created in a vacuum or in a very short period of time. My consultants are still here. We're ready and willing to respond to any of the questions that you continue to have even after tonight. But I think we've been given a lot of thought and we've been responsive to the comments, and I appreciate the opportunity to come here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Steele. Any questions? Vice Mayor Spector.
Thank you. Let me give you a thought and then just get your input on it now before you don't talk anymore and we're all chatting up here. Give me your thinking on, I'm listening to what everybody's saying, removing building 4 and then increasing the riparian corridor and decreasing the parking by making that move. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a very significant impact on our proposal, period. We didn't get here overnight thinking we're going to rush through and get something and be done. We started at 109 11 years ago. A year and a half ago we were at 56, and the project will not be able to support what we would like to do with all the other pieces here by taking the 12 units away. We've closely looked at the impacts to the creek from the very beginning, and as Pat has passionately gotten in front of the Planning Commission and says over and over, and even in his dreams at night, that without this project, the current condition of that creek will not improve. With this project, it is significantly improved beyond its current condition and will improve beyond that. And we need some project to be able to support that, and all the other infrastructure we're willing to put with the larger project, all the benefits that go to the other properties are all, and the affordable units are all on the back of some certain amount of units new. And when you start pulling back that many units, those aren't supported any longer.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? Councilmember Leonardis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Looking at the drawing here, listening to some of the concerns of the public, did you guys ever consider switching the footprints of Building 3 and Building 4?
Well, no, it grew. I'll start with this. It grew from trying to respect what's in place first, and what's there that we're working through and around are some heritage oak trees that we're trying to improve. So even where the hammerhead comes in has a heritage tree on both sides of that entrance that kind of dictates where those buildings need to be.
Follow-up question. So you're referring to the oak trees being in too close proximity to Building 3, whereas if it had a larger footprint in that location,
Yes,
you
right.
wouldn't be
It's
able to
actually,
achieve.
if you took 4, which is the longer building, and you put it where 3, where it is a shorter building, you would have to remove 2 oak trees, if I recall the drawing, at least the first one that's closest to Building 3 now.
How large are those trees from memory?
They're probably a good, for that, Pat, do you recall? They're fairly, I mean, the canopies on them, they're probably 25 feet. I'd say the base of them might be for a 24, you think? 24-inch diameter at the base is what we're trying to recollect. It's very mature. They don't get humongous in that species, but that one, 25 years old, 30 years old, at least, more.
Did you ever consider scooting Building 2 a little bit to, from my point of view, coming off of Millbrae to the left?
Yeah, I mean, part of that was trying to, the existing building that sits up above that has its one face. It faces outward on both sides of the building, one up the hill, one down the hill. And if we put that Building 1 much closer to 3, it starts impacting their balconies and patio areas fairly significantly, having a pinch point there. So we thought it justified having that setback. And I believe, Jim, that was Mr. Cannon comment about how far we needed to pull that building away from Building 1 from the existing building. So the town's architect, thinking back now a year and a half, was pressing us to pull that building away from the existing building, not put it closer.
Okay, I understand that part. But looking at Building 1 and Building 2, would you be able to move Building 2 closer to, say, the leasing center, and then perhaps put Building 4 where Building 3 is and Building 3 where Building 4 is, and still have the oak trees in that?
That's a good question, too. Another thing, and the civil can kick me if I'm wrong, but there is an existing sanitary line, if I recall, that goes through the existing building. Is just as you come in the property, there's a heritage redwood tree, which is next to the leasing office. Between Building 2 and Building 3, and just to the right of that heritage redwood tree, is a large sanitary line that goes through the property. And we would not be able to relocate that. It sits within an existing easement, so we honored that existing easement and placed the buildings outside the easement.
All right, thank you.
Okay, any further questions? Seeing none, I'll let you sit down, and I'm going to close the public hearing.
Thank you.
And I'll look to council discussion. Councilmember Brzezinski.
This is a question for our attorney. So the issue's been brought up more than once tonight related to the density bonus concerns. I believe you've indicated clearly that the interpretation that staff has of the density bonus laws and our own practice are congruent to the numbers that were projected. Would you care to make any further comments about that, given the fact that there were questions raised by our public in relationship to this?
In response that the town cannot grant a greater density than allowed under state law, there's recent California cases back in 2007 and more recent, the Wolmer case out of the city of Berkeley that was in 2009 after the 2008 amendment to the legislation that Ms. Quintana referred to. that determined that the state law is a mandatory floor, but it's not a ceiling. It's not ever considered by the court's interpretation to be a maximum. It's just a floor. Additionally, there is language in the state density bonus law, as pointed out, that even if the town doesn't have a density bonus ordinance, we're still required to comply with state law and the density bonus requirements. Separate and apart from that is the concept that these are apples and apples or oranges and oranges, and I think as staff pointed out in their staff report, is that you really have two separate issues. Is you have state law that you're mandated to follow, and you have a general plan, policy, statement, goal, and action item that the council has consistently applied to most projects. And those are separate. They're not apples and apples. They're really apples and oranges. Again, I think as one of the speakers pointed out, council could, in future projects, ask staff to bring back this issue. The issue of density bonus is on the council's work plan to address when you bring back the housing element and the overlay zones, affordable housing overlay zones. In the interim, council could ask staff to bring back this issue, not necessarily for this project, but to give staff direction and clarify by way of a resolution how you want staff to reconcile this issue going forward.
Do you have a follow-up, or were you?
I'm pondering. Okay.
Vice Mayor.
Thank you. And while he ponders, actually, I just wanted to put out thoughts because I'm very interested in hearing what everybody else has to say, because as very often the things we get before us, they're not clear-cut. I want to start out by saying I think the ability to get increased rentals and increased BMPs, affordable housing in Los Gatos, is fantastic. I know that there are a lot of folks who have a certain perception of Los Gatos, and I'm very proud of the fact that we have and we maintain 1/3 of our housing as rental housing. And I'm very proud that we started our below market price program back in the late 70s, early 80s, one of the first jurisdictions to do it, and we continue to do it. And so the fact that Los Gatos has those programs and that this developer seeks to increase them, that's good. I do have concerns about the number of units. I do hear and I have heard what the staff has said, and I've read everything that everybody has given me, and I agree that the state density bonus is a mandate, and so that gets you up to 160 units. I am not convinced that the town is an additor above and beyond that, and that we have basically a double dipping formula here. I am not convinced of that. I'm very happy that the developer, that the landowner now has a riparian plan that they did not have before the Planning Commission. I do have concerns, continue to have concerns about the water district issue, which is the buffer between the creek and the developed area of the project. So having an increased barrier there is something that I'm still thinking about and want to hear what everybody else has to say. And the last significant issue to me is architecture and site. I looked at the proposed architecture and the existing buildings. I do see a disconnect there. I'm not I'm not assuming that the disconnect will last forever, but I do see a disconnect in a very large project, and so it would be the kind of thing that I would want to go back to the Planning Commission. I know that there were several planning commissioners who raised that issue and were told that, I don't know what they were told, something like if you don't get past the mitigated negative declaration, you're not getting to architecture and site. So those are the issues that are still in play for me and that I'm interested in hearing what everybody else has to say.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. No other comments? Councilmember Brzezinski?
Of course.
You're done pondering.
Yeah. We always have a competition at this dais between or among values. And we are a value-driven community. That's why we are as beautiful a community as we are. This didn't happen accidentally. People over the course of our entire history have attempted to make sure that we proceeded cautiously into those things that would impact our community's character. And we are greatly blessed because of that. When I look at this project, I do think that there's going to be an impact that is in some ways difficult to accept, and that is the feel of the openness of the eastern portion of this property as you move away from the buildings down towards the creek. I've always felt that was a very, very attractive benefit to the residents of the community there, and certainly appreciate the concerns that they have as they see the project coming forward that is going to eliminate that particular characteristic. That said, I do believe that the benefit of the affordable housing that we have in front of us is very, very significant and is a value that has to be recognized by all of us in this community as something that we need to continue to pursue. I had a conversation with a young lady today who moved into this town a couple of years ago, rented an apartment not at Riviera Terrace but over off of Carlton, and felt that now that she owns a home in town, she felt always that it was a really welcoming community to her and to all the residents of her apartment complex. And she felt that's a salient characteristic of this town. I think we have an opportunity here that we seldom get, and that is to increase our affordable housing stock in the rental segment. This 1/3 of our properties, our residential properties that we have. When we look at this, I think we have to acknowledge the fact that we would not have the opportunity had not this developer intended to come forward and to increase the number of affordable units on that site. And that's why the density bonus language for us in town and state law exists, to do something that typically isn't done by most developers. I can recall over the last decade plus of sitting at this council, developers come in and hoping against hope that somehow they didn't have to build affordable, that it wouldn't pencil, that if they could contribute to a pool of money for some affordable site off campus, then that would be to their advantage. And we've always pressed to actually get properties in the ground, actual properties that could be used by people that were more affordable. And, you know, I think we have to be very cautious of concerning, in this case, of the concerns we have relative to the other factors at work. The riparian habitat needs to be restored. The environment of Riviera Terrace needs to be maintained. I do believe when we get to architecture and site that some of the questions raised here are going to have to be addressed. That this isn't a done deed yet, that there will have to be some negotiation. But at this point in time, I am inclined to approve the proposal, and I know that it will be somewhat disconcerting to some members of our community, as every one of our decisions seems to be these days. But the fact is that I want us to be a complete community. I want us to recognize that we have to weigh and balance values in every one of these proposals. And in this particular case, I think the value of affordability is a very significant addition to our community.
Was that a motion, or was that just comment at this moment?
Well, that's a comment. I would say I'll make a motion if we feel we've heard enough discussion. But I'd be interested, as Councilwoman Spector indicated, to hear more from council.
All right. Councilmember McNutt.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I thought I was going to be responding to a motion and putting my 2 cents in on that, so I got distracted there for a minute. So as I'm going through my analysis, and clearly I'm obviously in agreement with the other council members who've spoken about my commitment to affordable housing. It is something that is important to me personally. It's important to this community. It's something that we've had indicated in the general plan in the last iteration and in the current iteration. And we need to always be looking for opportunities to increase our inventory of affordable housing. The number of units is interesting because this is our first time in dealing with a state density bonus, and therefore there has been a lot of confusion among Planning Commission and Council as we worked through how to do the calculations. And I have to admit, I did the same thing as many of you. I had my calculator out today, and then over the weekend, and I was doing, well, if you did 20% this way, and then you added this one on, well, if you did it the other way, and how can you play with these numbers in such a way that come up with a different result other than ending up with the proposal of 173. What I came to realize is that we have a very lengthy state law to work with. We have the opinion and experience and calculations of professional planning staff. We have the opinion from our legal counsel. So I thought, okay, who am I to come up with a whole different methodology? I think we have enough evidence in all of the reports that we've given as to the rationale unto this calculation. I don't think that this is a council policy decision. I think it is what it is, and this is the maximum. Actually, they're coming in a little bit less at the maximum, and that really is not something that we can debate and discuss much farther. In terms of the impact on the environment and the Planning Commission's concern about the environmental impacts and the mitigation plan, they did specifically ask for a more detailed restoration plan, mitigation plan, and that has been produced. I wish the Water District had been more specific when it said, oh, we'd like to see a different buffer. I've dealt with them personally on my own property, and they are strangely equally sometimes incredibly vague and sometimes incredibly specific. So we're kind of guessing as to their level of concern about that. But I do feel that since they didn't go specific in this particular case, it wasn't that high a priority of them that we can't solve it by the possible solutions that were proposed here this evening that can be worked out, I think, during the next phase in architecture and site. I talked earlier about my concern about transition, my concern about the architecture, Mr. Cannon's concerns that he outlined in his report. And again, I think those would be worked out as we go through the process. So I am in the position that if someone's making a motion that I probably to approve this and to move forward on it, I would probably be supportive of it.
Okay. Councilmember Leonardis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I've gone through all the numbers here extensively, you know, the question keeps being raised, what is the proper amount of density or units allowed on this site? And sometimes you think in terms of numbers and density, and maybe you should be thinking more in terms of footprint of the building. And the reason why I asked Mr. Steele if those two buildings could be swapped is because one footprint's 2,000 square feet and the other is 4,000 square feet. So we're talking about 12 units with a footprint of 4,000 square feet. Is that something like that, 3,900? So in reality, if we were to say, if we cut 12 units off of this project and we were in jeopardy of losing the whole project and losing, you know, this opportunity for affordable housing and putting some improvements into this property, which is really quite tired. It really needs, this is an area of town which is in downtown Los Gatos, but it just doesn't get a lot of attention. And, you know, the improvements to the creek, which I think will be very helpful. I just think over a 4,000 square foot footprint, that would be a lost opportunity. We could be subjective and say, well, it seems like it should be more 160 or 173 or whatever. It would be nice to have a few more square feet in that area, the riparian area, if there's a way to work with architecture and site to achieve that. As I suggested, maybe switching out those two footprints or doing something. You know, so for lack of a better explanation on density bonuses in our town local ordinance regulating all that, I would not like to see an opportunity like this be discarded or in jeopardy of being us missing it over just a few units, or in other words, a small footprint. Preferably, you know, I would like to see less density all the time, but if you look at us rezoning this, we're looking at 30 units per acre. And in the future, what could happen if the old building ends up getting torn down someday? The units will just get put in that location. So we might give them less units now, but more units will be proposed later if that were ever to be done, if it becomes economically feasible down the road for them. So I think it's kind of a moot point to wrestle with the amount of units. If at this point of the game, in consideration of the state laws as well. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, before I look for a motion, I'll give a couple of comments myself. First of all, the attorney alluded to a potential clarifying resolution to get us answers on this type of a thing going forward, and I would very much be in favor of getting that clarification. With regards to the numbers, as much as I've read and heard, I will go with our council's opinion of what is the correct and allowable number. I'm a little concerned of the lack of discretion that we're given in cases like this. The state mandates certain things, and quite frankly, I think that planning for Los Gatos is best done in Los Gatos, not in Sacramento. But that being said, the issues that were brought up by the Planning Commission about the riparian corridor, I think, have been addressed and addressed adequately. Councilmember Brzezinski's comments on the architecture and site, I will echo, and I hope that the Planning Commission takes note of the integration between the existing and the new. And those are my comments in addition to what you've already heard. So at that, I will look for a motion. I'm going to put my head on a swivel until I see a hand up. Councilmember Brzezinski.
All right, Councilman Inspector will make the motion at this time.
You
No,
probably wouldn't want it.
I'll actually make the motion then. I'm going to go with the alternate recommendation on our staff report to approve the application. And we need to waive the reading of the proposed ordinance. Do we need a motion for that? Madam Attorney?
That can be part of your entire motion.
All right.
And one package.
Then I will, as part of this motion to include waiving the reading, move to adopt the mitigated negative deck Exhibit 2 of Attachment 1 in our packet and the mitigation monitoring plan, which is Attachment 14 in our packet. Why don't we stop there and just get that motion?
I think we need to read the title before we go any further. So, Madam Clerk, would you read the title?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ordinance of the Town of Los Gatos amending the town code effecting a zone change from RM 12-20 to RM 12-20 PD for property located at 135 Riviera Drive.
All right.
Thank you. Did you wish to continue?
Yes. Then I'll move to adopt the findings supporting the zone change, that's Attachment 13 in our packet, and approve the application subject to the performance standards included in the Plan Development Ordinance, and introduce the ordinance of the Town of Los Gatos efficating the zone change from RM 1220 to RM 1220 PD, which is Attachment 15. And that's my motion.
Okay, that's the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second, but I have a question or a possible amendment.
Okay, we have a second. Go right ahead.
Okay. In the staff report on pages 4 and 5, there's a recommendation that we add a performance standard to the PD ordinance. Does that need to be part of the motion? Should the motion maker want to do that?
We're going to go ahead and assume
I would suggest including it, and we revise the PD ordinance.
that would be included in the, it's acceptable to the motion maker.
And then the other item is I would like to see ANS go back to Planning Commission rather than DRC.
Absolutely.
Would that be a possibility?
Absolutely. Put that in as well.
Mr. Manager.
And we do have 2 administrative corrections that I'd like to have Suzanne read. 2 26s should be 25, and we'd just like to note that.
In Section 2 of the PD ordinance, Item 5 says designation and implementation of 25, it should read 25 affordable units and 24 low-income units and 1 moderate income. It says 26 and 25, so we would correct that to 25 affordable units, 24 low-income, 1 moderate. And then Condition 4 also has, it's on page 3 of the ordinance, it has the incorrect numbers and would be changed to 25 total, 24 of which are low-income.
All right. That correction is appropriate.
Okay. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. In talking with the applicant's representative, it seemed to me, and this goes back to what was just raised about the performance standard, and I don't know where this would go, but Attachment 16, which was the restoration plan, it seems to me that, and the testimony was that this document constitutes the restoration plan, and so therefore should be part of what is required of the applicant. And I think the applicant's representative said that the way these are overseen by jurisdictions is that they have to be completed prior to the building permit. And so my question for the maker of the motion, the seconder, and staff is where does this go?
The restoration plan could be specified and probably should be included in the ordinance as a performance standard. The timing of it, it doesn't have to be building permit. I think we should have a plan in place completed by that point, but obviously the implementation couldn't occur because it's going to be over a period of years.
I would say, as the maker of the motion, though, that should be included in our expectation that this will be the plan, the detailed plan that will be followed, with the assumption that this is a continuing restoration, so it's not assumed to be completed prior to the issuance of...
Right, but they should secure the permit from Department of Fish and Game.
Okay.
And that performance standard will be added for the second
Thank you.
reading.
Vice Mayor.
And as I understand it, it is Fish and Games, and it could be other government entities. And I think what needs to be done before the building permit is that whatever government entity agreements have to occur, that those would occur. And then I have one more.
Okay, is that acceptable
Yes,
to the
absolutely.
maker and to the seconder?
Yes, I believe that's
Okay.
routine.
And then Councilmember McNutt had brought up the issue of how the current tenants would be transitioned and the opportunities they would be given. And in conversation with the applicant, that was called at one point a transition plan, at another point a marketing plan. And so I would like to just put out there for consideration whether that in some form should be part of our performance standards.
That is included. We didn't call it a marketing plan. We called it a affordable housing a plan instead. We have a different title for it.
And is that a number in the PD?
You can find it quicker. She can find it quicker than I can.
To your point, Councilwoman Spector, if it's not, it should be, and we will include it. Right.
Ms. Davis says I may have the prior version that went to Planning Commission, but I believe it's condition under Section 5, Condition 5, Conditions 4 and 5. But 5 was BMP phasing. The applicant shall submit a, she's right, it did change.
Yes. It is in Condition 5, affordable unit phasing.
Okay.
Performance Standard 5.
All right. Any other amendments to the motion?
Councilmember McNutt?
Thank you. I actually can't fly through this quite as quickly as you can and find it, but my recollection is that was talking about conversion of the older units into affordable units, which is not what we're talking about. We're talking about a transition plan for current residents into affordable units and into the new units. So it's a separate item. So I would suggest that the motion just say something like staff to include staff drafting language that references a transition plan for current residents, if that's in fact what you're thinking. Mr.
That's exactly what I'm thinking, and that's why I said if it's not there, it will be there.
So the second reading, we will ensure it includes a performance standard for a transition plan for all residents, not just those moving into affordable units.
Correct.
Right. Thank you.
Right.
Anything else?
Thank you,
Councilmember
Mr.
Leonardis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There was a little bit of discussion earlier from Ms. Davis and Mr. Steele about the possibility of lessening the impact in the riparian zone through the elimination of, 4 to 8 parking places. Just like to see if that can be looked at once again.
I don't think that would be part of the motion. I think that wouldn't relate to architecture and site. It's a recommendation, but I don't see that as
Okay.
appropriate to the motion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anything else? Seeing no further discussion, I'll call the question. Those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. I have nothing else on this evening's agenda, so I will call this meeting adjourned. Go Niners.